Hey everybody, welcome back to another deck crash course. Before we get into it though, there has been a Wargame patch. Some people have been wondering what it is because they didn't see the post or whatnot. They posted on Reddit. It's just two little things really: fixing crash occurring on when loading some maps. Nobody knows which maps. Apparently starting at 10 versus 10 on Gyol still crashes the map, so who knows. And then actually a new function, adding a functionality allowing players to join game lobby through an invitation code. What does this mean? Well, first of all, you can join using an invite code, or when you create a lobby. I don't know if you have to set it private, but I'm just gonna do it here. And click on invite. You can see the invite button here. And when it comes to the friend list, you can see whether it's on Steam or whether they use an account. You know, I think if they haven't logged in yet or recently, it will only show their Steam, but you can see if they have logged in and I have them on Steam, then they show up twice. I'm not really 100% certain how exactly it works. I assume this is a functionality added for the Epic Game Store release of the game, which probably comes out fairly soon. Also, the first time you log in now, you have to accept a privacy policy. And in case anyone is wondering, no, the leaderboard has not been reset. Top 4 is still cheaters. I think that's all regarding the patch, and I'll see you in just a sec once we get over the deck. And as you all probably know, if you read the title, today we're gonna take a look at Blue Dragons, a deck that has some very strong basic units, yet I wouldn't call them holes, but in certain areas they just lack certain types of units or are just very awkward, most notably in the support and tank tab, but they have some very strong synergies between other tabs. But let's take a look at it from the beginning, which is of course logistics. They have a very good CV here. Before the Archerit was in the game, this was one of my favorite, if not the favorite, vehicle CV. It's affordable, it has Browning. Again, do not underestimate the addition of an MG, especially if it's 50 cal on a CV. It can actually save their lives. 2 all-around armor, so around all sides it will only take 40% of HE damage. Very nice. Of course, it doesn't nearly mean it's unkillable, right? One direct Uragan rocket will still deal 4.8 damage. A direct 10 HE shot will still do 4 damage, right? But it's significantly more survivable than anything with less than 2 armor. And of course, thanks to the availability bonus of I think it's 15%. I'm too lazy to look it up now. 15 or 20%. You actually get 5 instead of 4, which means that actually it has to be 20 because otherwise you still only get 3 infantry CVs. Infantry CVs also become 4 instead of 3, so you can get away with just these 2. Whereas in a deck with 15 or even less availability bonus, you would only get 7 CVs in total versus 9, and it is actually a much bigger deal than it might sound like first. At least in 1 versus 1s. In team games, that's not that big of a deal, at least not when it comes to logistics tab. When it comes to supply, that's one of the first awkward things. When it comes to ground-based supplies, they only have 10 and 15 points. I mean, you can use helicopter supplies, most notably. I would only really put this in if you know beforehand you're playing on a really big map in a team game, then sure, otherwise I would not go for it. I would always go for the 15.1 because while they're not particularly fast and have only 5 HP as well, the 10.1 ones are just so slow. I mean, 15.1s are already slow, but 10 points is just, and you get, when you get 300 extra supply, which is more than 50% extra, even though it costs, you get more bang for a buck. It's acceptable, it's workable. Just keep in mind with having only 5 HP they die relatively fast, so try not to keep them like a 4 stack next to each other, at least near the front line. And of course a fob, I like running a fob. You don't have to, because Blue Dragons doesn't have the strongest artillery, but yeah. Infantry tab, here's the first thing where they have some really strong basics, most notably in the basic stuff. But first let's take a card of Helping 90, just very strong, Panzerfaust 3. I prefer them in the wheel transport because the 5 point is just 1 armor, so I might as well pay the extra 5 points for wheels, and they're expensive anyway, so that's 5 points, not a huge difference. Then I like to take a card of the Hachiki Oshiki. I like to use them in the Han. You can also use them in with the Shoujo Buntai 90. if that's how you're supposed to pronounce it. You can also take Fudoran in the WAPC I used to run for a long time. You can take a card of KFV 25s. It's really up to you. That also works. But I just like having a heavier type of IFVs. Although when it comes to in the autocannon range, it will lose to Martyr 2s, CV90s, and STRF 9040s, but it should have no issue dealing with PvPs and such. Do not underestimate the ATGM. It's not amazing, but especially fighting like IFVs or something at longer range or sniping some AAPs can really come in handy. Next up, I take 2 cards of Sojin Su 90 in the K200. Very strong grinding infantry. Basically, more or less, very much on the level of Grenadier spam, Zelda spam, Rifleman spam, Shanshi spam. Just a bit different, compared to Razzmann, you have only 2 front and side, but you get an extra MG. Although I believe it can only shoot up front, and of course it has no stabilizer, so it's a bit weird. But of course they have the M72A 4 so 16 AP and a bit more accuracy. Very nice grinding infantry. Again, you can also take them in the KAFV. I like to run at least 1 card of these. Alternatively, you can also run Yebigun, get the same transport, and you get just a lot more for much cheaper. Very much versatile, or 1 of each, whatever you want, all worth running. And last but not least, the card of Chumat, honestly downweighted because they're affordable. They're essentially a bit worse spikes. They're still very fast, not quite as fast as spikes, but still very fast. A bit less accurate, but still very good. You can run manpads, but I don't like running them in my unspec deck. I really like running 5 of quote-unquote proper infantry. And if you're really worried about hand fighting, you can take a card of Kute 90. Keep in mind, base Kute have normal SMG accuracy. This is just displaying the wrong weapon. Outside of CQC, they have 40% accuracy and stabilizers like every other elite SMG. Now, PSAM, Stinger, Hood, Mistral, whatever you want, you can put in. I prefer not to. AA, not the best hawk, but it's a decent hawk. 55% base accuracy, good range, 9 HE. You'd like to see it. Good anti-helicopter range, so it will one-shot nearly all helicopters that aren't Heinz. If they get next to it. Just, typical hawk issues, slow, squishy, lack of ammunition. Once again, though, you get 4 instead of 3, which is kind of nice. At least in team games, it can certainly be nice. Tansam short arrow, you honestly can really get away with not running this. I'm not sure what other AAPs to run, and it's just nothing else that really fills this gap of like a fast helicopter-focused AAPs. You could run maybe a Biho or a gun tank if you want a long range. I would go for the Biho because the autonomy on the gun tank is just not very good. But next I run the K263. It's your pivots, 0.2 seconds aim time, so it aims really fast. But usually my main AAPs are going to be the K263, Hawk Pip, and the Ninja. Artillery-wise, in team games you can run the K9 Thunder. 1 versus 1s, I would not recommend it. I run the M110 A2 or 2 or 3 SP, downweighted for 1 versus 1s. Again, also perfectly fine in team games. You can meme around with this if you want. And then I run with basic 40-point mortar. MLRS systems, not really worth running. Tank-wise, I usually skip the K1A1. You can certainly run it in team games if you want a lot of heavier tanks, but in 1 versus 1s, I do not run it. I run 2 cards of the Q upweighted. Veterancy really helps, and I don't think I need more than 2. Or if I really need a 3rd one, like I'm really desperate to need one, then I probably lost anyway. K1 upweighted, maybe downweighted. It's up to you. How many you run. It's gonna be bread and butter together with your Sojang Su in basically any game. Maybe not necessarily team games, but 1 versus 1s for sure. Anion Shikiji with my fourth tank up. I'm not 100% certain what to run. You could run the M41, but I run the M36 in the vehicle tab, so I don't need it. Roku Ichishiki is kind of a trap in my eyes. I mean, 15 points, 8 RPM, 3 HE, acceptable range, Browning, and 6 armor. Sounds like a dream, but abysmal autonomy coupled with abysmal speed just hurts this unit a lot. I tried this a lot, it just doesn't work for me. I'll get deeper into this in a later date in the tank tier list. Recon tab Ninja is a must, also very crucial to your anti-air defense in my eyes. It's also pretty affordable, and together with the Peace Pheasant you can do some really dirty stuff, especially in the more open areas. Good stealth is just crazy. It's very small as well, 6 HP, very fast. It's just crazy hard to kill for like non-Tunguska pieces and stuff like that. Attack of Teokyeonsa in the helicopter, the UH-60 specifically, because it's the fastest by far. 1 in the ground transport. And last but not least, the card of Hachinano Shiki upweighted. You can also run JSDF and like either transport really here. Some people like to run them in WAPC. KAFV if you want something that has a bit more oomph than the Hachinana, but I just like having something wheeled. M36 for like your main cheap fire support works really well and then fills the gap that I would otherwise fill with the KAFV25 in infantry type. Mitsubishi Chumat used to be meta until it got price nerfed, I believed. Renzo is kind of fun, but not that great, honestly. And this is kind of, if you really need base defense in like forest areas against helicopters, this can actually do some nice stuff. H1T and H1J really only noticeably good helicopters. H1T is just straight up better than the 1S. You might as well pay the 10 points. H1G just a very cheap rocket pod helicopter autocannon. Just incredibly versatile, incredibly useful. AirTab. ASFs can be a bit awkward. I mean, the Block 52 is an absolute monster. Definitely upvoted in 1 versus 1s. Team games, it's up to you. If you're more depending on the seat, you might want to downvet it because you have such good accuracy anyway. If you really depend on it for ASF as well, probably upvet it. KF16C, the only other good alternative, or addition rather, depending on a single ASF is what I would not recommend, especially with Blue Dragons that don't have the strongest air defense versus planes. And then in my 1 versus 1 deck, I just run 2 cards of Peace Pheasants. You could also run 1 card of F1's 1 Peace Pheasant. But 1 card is, in my opinion, a must. It's a very strong ATGM plane. Not the most survivable one, but together with the Ninja, you can really spot a lot of stuff. And just sometimes, you just snipe the AA, and then you just come with the second Peace Fan after, right? Peace Run. Keep in mind, you have 4 missiles on a fast plane at 90 points. It's incredibly cheap, incredibly cost efficient. So yeah, if you want to be dirty and try hard a lot, try to spot the AA with a Ninja. If they don't have ground objects nearby, then the AA will not spot the Ninja back. And then just snipe it with a Peace Pheasant, especially on open maps like Paddyfield or Mudfight, incredibly strong and frustrating for your opponent. If you need a Helo Hunter, they have it in F104 somewhere. Or they only have this? Do they not have an F104? Only an F5? Am I blind? Oh no, there it is. F104 can work. It's not the best, but it's acceptable. I wouldn't bother with this one. It's just too awkward. And as fast as it is, it will often only get 1 missile off, so it's usually less consistent in the Rio. F15J is also a trap, as amazing as it looks with this skin pack that I've installed. Kai is a kind of a meme plane with a pseudo multi-roll. I have a weakness for this, but it's really not that good of a plane. And when it comes to HE bombers in general, or indirect HE damage, Blue Dragons is pretty weak. Like artillery and bomber wise, not very strong. But yeah, that's Blue Dragons, really good in forests with K1s and K200s. Biggest problem for them is if your opponent uses a lot of MLRS, because you don't have anything to like MLRS your opponent with. So that can sometimes be really strong against you, so you have to be careful. Also, one of the reasons why I upvet the Q Maru, so it recovers from the panic and stun much faster. Since you can't do that yourself, you're also kind of more vulnerable to it because you can't even the playing field. But yeah, that's Blue Dragons, and that's a short patch overview. Hope you learned something. Hope you found it interesting, and I'll hopefully see you next time.